Three friends had planned the trip for weeks. It wasn't meant to be an adventure into danger, just a quiet weekend camping deep in the Appalachian Mountains. They wanted to escape the noise of town, leave their phones off, and spend 2 nights by a fire under the stars. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, cool air, and trails scattered with autumn leaves crunching beneath their boots. Spirits were high as they joked about who would burn dinner first or who would be the first to complain about the cold. By late afternoon, they found the spot they were looking for. An old fire ring off a side trail, far enough from the main path that they wouldn't be disturbed. It felt almost too secluded, but that was the point. They dropped their packs, gathered wood, and set up camp. As flames licked upward into the fading light, the forest grew quiet. And for a moment, it was exactly what they wanted: peace, away from everything. One of them remarked how perfect it was, how the silence felt almost heavy. The others agreed, though none said out loud that the quiet wasn't entirely comforting. Still, they laughed, cooked, and settled in as darkness began to swallow the trees. They had no idea that before the night ended, they'd see something they still can't explain. The first evening passed with the kind of comfort only a campfire can bring. They cooked simple food, traded stories, and let the flames chase away the chill. The glow carved their faces out of the darkness, while beyond the circle of light, the forest remained a solid wall of black. It felt safe, contained, almost like the woods had agreed to leave them alone. As the hours stretched, the mood turned playful. One of them suggested they tell ghost stories, just to test who would scare first. They laughed, inventing tales about strange hermits and long-forgotten miners who still haunted the hills. The joking kept the fear at bay, until the silence between their words became noticeable. The fire popped, but the forest beyond it held nothing. No owls, no insects, not even the distant movement of deer. It was subtle at first, a creeping awareness that they were being observed. Each time someone glanced toward the tree line, it felt like eyes darted away. Yet whenever the flashlight beam cut through the woods, it showed only trees. They shrugged it off, convincing themselves the mind plays tricks in the dark. Still, when they finally zipped up their tents, none of them fell asleep quickly. Because for all their laughter, not one of them could shake the feeling that something was standing just outside the firelight, waiting. Sometime past midnight, one of them stirred awake. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a faint red shimmer over the camp. He sat up, blinking, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks. Out beyond the dying light, deep in the tree line, something glowed faintly. At first, it looked like a lantern swinging in the dark. He nudged his friend awake, and soon all three were sitting up, staring into the forest. The glow moved, slowly at first, weaving between the trees. Then another appeared, further off. 2 lights, then 3, blinking in and out as though someone carried lanterns but never made a sound. They leaned forward, whispering, maybe other hikers? But it didn't make sense. Why would anyone be walking without flashlights, so far off trail, in silence? The lights shifted unnaturally, gliding upward, dipping low, then vanishing entirely before reappearing yards away. Their stomachs twisted with dread as they realized it wasn't just one person, and it wasn't behaving like anything human. For nearly an hour, the lights danced in the woods, always distant, but always visible. Then, just as suddenly as they'd come, they disappeared. The forest returned to black. The 3 sat frozen, waiting. They thought that was the end of it, until something else stepped into the circle of firelight. It was almost 1 in the morning when the sound of slow, deliberate steps crunched on the leaves just beyond the fire ring. The 3 froze, their breath caught in their throats. Then, From the tree line, a figure emerged. At first glance, it looked like a man, tall, thin, shoulders slightly hunched. It stopped just beyond the reach of the fire, as if testing how close it should come. The flames flickered, throwing its shape into sharp relief. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, with an unnatural stillness that felt wrong immediately. One of them whispered, "Hello?" The word broke the air like glass. The figure gave no reply. It didn't even shift its weight. When one of the friends raised a flashlight and shone it toward the stranger, the beam seemed to blur its face. Not shadow, not glare, just blurred, as though the features weren't fully there. They sat paralyzed, caught between fight and flight. The figure remained unmoving, its head tilted slightly, watching. Minutes dragged by like hours until the fire sputtered lower. And with the flames dimming, they saw it take one slow step closer. That was when fear finally pushed through their paralysis. A figure lingered at the edge of the dying firelight, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. One of the friends shouted, demanding to know who it was. For the first time, it moved, but not like a person should. The head turned, slow and deliberate, almost fully sideways, while the body stayed perfectly still. Then it took another step forward. The fire popped weakly, flames shrinking, and with each flicker, the air seemed heavier, colder. It felt like the heat was being drained away. Panic surged. One of them grabbed a branch from the fire and swung it forward, sparks exploding into the dark. The figure didn't flinch. It simply shifted back a pace, gliding more than walking, as though its feet barely touched the ground. Then, with a sickening realization, they noticed the sound, or the lack of it. No footsteps, no crunch of leaves, just silence that followed its movements. The three friends scrambled back, shouting at each other, fear breaking into chaos. They tried to force themselves to believe it was a prank, a stranger messing with them, but deep down, they knew. Something about the stillness, the blurred face, the way the fire dimmed around it. It wasn't human. And when it leaned just slightly forward, as though preparing to step closer, instinct took over. They ran. They bolted into the trees, stumbling over roots and branches, their flashlights bouncing wildly in the dark. The only thought in their minds was distance, get away, don't look back. But even as they crashed through the undergrowth, the sound they dreaded followed them. Not footsteps, not the uneven thud of someone running, something smoother. It was as if the figure slid through the forest, always just behind, always near. One of them shouted to cut left toward the main trail, and they sprinted, lungs burning, legs shaking. Each time they slowed, the presence closed in. The air grew heavy, pressing against their chests, their beams of light suddenly flickering weaker, as if drained by the same force that had dimmed the fire. Branches snapped around them, but never directly in their path, like it was hurting them. Panic, blurred thought, adrenaline carrying them forward. The forest, once so inviting, now felt endless and hostile, trees twisting into walls around them. Every nerve screamed that if they stopped, even for a second, the figure would finally step close enough to touch. And still, behind them, they swore they could hear the faint hiss of something whispering through the dark. At last, the trees began to thin, and the faint outline of the main trail came into view. Relief surged, but it was tangled with fear, because whatever followed them hadn't stopped. The moment they slowed to catch their breath, the silence behind them broke with a soft rustle, a reminder that it was still there. They pushed harder, boots pounding the dirt path as they spilled out onto the trail. For a fleeting second, the familiar curve of the path felt like safety, something solid and human. But when they looked back, the forest behind them glowed faintly. Small, pale lights blinked between the trunks, drifting in strange patterns, lanterns with no carriers, eyes with no bodies. One of them raised his flashlight and aimed it back. The beam reached only a few yards before fizzling out, swallowed by the dark. And in that fading glow, all three swore they saw it. The tall figure, still standing at the tree line, its head cocked, watching. None of them waited to see more. They ran until the trail widened into the parking area, lungs tearing, hearts hammering. They didn't look back again. But even in the safety of the car, they couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them out of the woods. They slammed the car doors shut and locked them, gasping in the stale air. None of them spoke on the drive home. Every glance in the mirrors made their stomachs twist, expecting to see a tall shape on the side of the road. Only when the city lights came into view did they feel the pressure lift, though the silence in the car stayed heavy. In the weeks that followed, the story became harder to tell. When they tried, people dismissed it as nerves, imagination, or a campfire prank. But the three of them never wavered, because each remembered the same details: the lights drifting in the trees, the blurred, faceless head tilting in silence, the way it moved without sound. Other hikers later claimed to have seen something similar in the same region, a tall, featureless figure that stood just beyond firelight. Some called it folklore, others a mountain spirit. But for the three friends, it wasn't myth. It was memory. Even now, years later, they still dream of that night. The fire sputtering low, the forest holding its breath, and the figure watching without eyes. And each time they wake, the same question haunts them. What followed them out of those mountains, and does it still wait there in the dark?